Welcome to the Trish and Sarah Wrestling Podcast. I'm Sarah.
I'm Trish.
And this is our podcast. We talk about wrestling news and various topics from different promotions, primarily AEW, but also New Japan Pro Wrestling, WWE, and topics from around the wrestling world. Whatever we find interesting, and we hope you will too. We are a proud member of the Social Suplex Podcast Network, and you can find our content on our podcast feed, the Social Suplex Podcast feed, as well as on Twitter and YouTube. Please feel free to like, subscribe, and rate our podcast. Today is Sunday, August 18th, 2024, and we are going to kick off our episode with some updated information on the Janel Grant lawsuit. In this case, the dispute between and the sort of different filings between Janel Grant and Dr. Kolker, who, if you recall, is the doctor who operated the wellness clinic where Janel Grant was treated at Vince McMahon's behest, according to her. Janel Grant filed a petition to have Dr. Kolker release documents to her and sort of give her more information about the treatment she received. Dr. Kolker fired back. We talked about this a little bit in our last episode. He was very upset about the lawsuit, and he filed his own petition, essentially asking for documentation that she had. And Janel Grant has filed a counter motion again, essentially saying that she's filing to strike his complaint that he filed, and saying that wanted to dismiss the bill of discovery. Kolker wanted to have her deposed as part of the lawsuit, and she's saying that she wants to dismiss this. And she also wants attorney's fees and costs. So this sort of feels like a proxy war between Vince McMahon and Janel Grant in some ways, since I think Dr. Kolker could probably be argued as one of his more closer associates. But it does sort of show that there is still things going on with this case, even as the Grant and McMahon case is paused at the request of the federal government. So, Trish, I don't know if you have any comment on this. I obviously want to thank Pollock and Thurston for the detailed reports they have. This is where we got some of our information from. So I'm not sure if you have anything you want to talk about with this.
The motion to strike also confirmed that Dr. Kolker and Peak Wellness are the clinic and a doctor that were identified in the original lawsuit. Yes. So we talked about it last time about having a quite a big suspicion of it, or something that you could probably acknowledge, but you couldn't be 100% certain of. Well, now we have it named as like that. There was also that McMahon's lawyers attempted to get this thrown out, and they were denied under the fact that it was in a different court. So we talked about federal to public courts last time around, which was kind of a surprise because we wondered if that would be action, but the different courts is what protected that from doing so. And then we had Vince's lawyers also saying that he is not unwell. Rumors that had come from Linda McMahon that his health was deteriorating, and that was denied by Vince's lawyers. The other one to link up with this is that Linda McMahon has been announced as potentially on the Trump transition team if he is to win the election.
Yes.
And that's something to keep in mind, that if this case was to move forward or progress, that could be a huge difference maker in the outcome. As scary as it is to say a political appointment can be a difference maker, but we know that's the case. So I think that's all the comments I have on this part.
Yep, I just wanted to make sure you guys continue to realize that there's stuff going on with this, and obviously keep you apprised as it goes down. So the other thing that happened in regards to the Janel Grant lawsuit this week was Mark Henry decided that he should make some comments about this. Mark Henry was on a podcast with Jerry Briscoe and JBL, and they were discussing Vince and not wanting to let Vince down. And Mark Henry gave the following quote, which I'm going to read to you. And I say, quote from Mark Henry: "He is going through a tough time with all the stuff that happened happened recently. I never saw none of that. I never heard no negativity like that. Him playing a damn joke on me was the worst of it. It was nothing remotely bad what I have to say about Vince. I've took some heat for saying that before. People be like, you're being insensitive, and there are other people that suffered. I say, yeah, but a lot of those people you are all talking about suffering, their suffering got worse when the money ran out. Where was the suffering when they were getting BMWs and $1 million? Did that pacify the suffering? Because if you were suffering, you should suffer all the time, right? Nothing should get in the way of that. So, this is one of those quotes that you hear it and you're like, oh, maybe it's being taken out of context. And then you read the full quote and it's so much worse than you thought it was going to be. This is, sort of that mentality that if you accept any kind of money for anything like this happening, then you can't be possibly a victim. It's just kind of gross from Mark Henry, but,
It just explains what we have to contend with, what these people and what potential victims or the industry have to contend with, because this all relates back. And you listen, so I actually went and listened to the clip and listened to kind of the minutes around it. And when you listen to Briscoe and you listen to JBL and Henry, you can see how that loyalty to Vince, because of what he gave them or how they view of what they gave him, drives their opinion on this. Yeah. Rather than anything else. And they do say, they'll say, I think that they didn't see anything themselves and that sort of thing. But it's very much driven by that. But you also have to think, you're saying these things in a public place, you're making these public statements, this is where the industry just has to kind of progress. It needs to move forward. And this is where we're stuck. So while we have so many people who kind of think they owe their career to Vince McMahon, I don't know how much we'll move past these things. Yeah.
And, we talked about this, and I can certainly understand conflicted feelings from people who had positive experiences with Vince McMahon themselves, right? Like, I think we're all human beings, and having simultaneously conflicting emotions is not a sign of mental weakness. It's a sign of mental health. And I could certainly understand where people would say, geez, I'm really struggling with this. This is somebody who meant a lot to me, blah, 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 blah. But this kind of stuff is not it. But, I don't know. It's unfortunately pretty standard, not just in wrestling, but you do hear this kind of comment, whenever you discuss any kind of sexual harassment suit. So,
sure.
Yuck. So, moving on from that, we also kind of want to discuss the general WWE antitrust situation, especially in regards to how they're handling AEW. And, how they've sort of changed their strategy in terms of running against AEW in how they're handled. This sort of really came out because it was announced this week that WWE will be running a house show the same night as the World's End pay-per-view, literally like 10 minutes away in Orlando. Both of these events are. So, this is kind of comes back down again to this idea that no, WWE is not doing anything about AEW. They're not even thinking about them. Like, come on. Nobody should be saying that in the year of our Lord 2024. So, Trish, you have some thoughts on this strategy process and, what WWE is doing a little bit differently. So I'm going to let you kick us off on this one.
So the thing is that, do you know when we discussed the SEO thing with the Dominic Mysterio and Liv Morgan kind of storyline? And there was kind of questions about, is this really actually happening? And then they did the thing with the Logan Paul lawsuit.
Yes.
And it was like, oh, there you go. So it's kind of like they do it and they're under the surface, and then they do something really blatant where you can't deny it. And this is exactly the same scenario. This behavior is not new. They have been doing this sort of thing to undermine kind of other promotions or other shows for as long as you can remember, pushing pay-per-views from other companies off the air under threat of you will lose WrestleMania, running shows till 2 a.m. and not vacating a venue that the next company is in the next day, booking Coventry Skydome, one of the weirdly little tiny arenas in the UK, to undermine an independent show in the UK in 2005. MSG for New Japan, trying to stop them from running that venue. One of my favourites ones is running an NXT show in Cardiff because they thought Royal Quest was doing poorly. And actually there was 2 vendors. So it did a lot better than they thought. But even, if you want to talk about what they're doing to other companies at the moment. Potentially, you could even look at them running 2 dates at Ryogoku 3 weeks ago, 3 weeks before the finals of the G1. So this is kind of their normal kind of behavior. This behavior hasn't changed since Vince McMahon went. In fact, Triple H, you can look at some of them examples, they are him. So this is brand new. But the difference this year is last year they challenged the TV tapings.
Yes.
So we had stopping on sales until their show had been through the market. So we saw that in Hartford, Connecticut for the Collision show. We saw it in Memphis, Tennessee. And then the other thing what they did was they were basically following around the country. So we had a number of dates where WWE and AEW were in the same market within 3 or 4 weeks of each other. And what they did was lower the ticket pricing and them things, absolutely target those markets. So they were very much after the TV markets last year in terms of attendance. This year they've switched it and they are really going after these pay-per-views.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So just to give kind of some examples for people to kind of think about is Forbidden Door, SmackDown ran MSG the Friday before. All In was announced earlier. All of a sudden we had Bash at Berlin. It's coming a week later. But again, it affects the kind of demand for the market. They then ran Clash at the Castle, and then straight after Clash at the Castle, they announced a house show tour for October. All Out got moved 1 week because of Bash at Berlin being on Labor Day. And then now we have the NXT debut on the 1st of October, also in Chicago. And then Wrestle Dream, which... to be fair, at least they didn't fuck up the on-sale for Wrestle Dream like they did last year. So that's quite good. Because last year they announced Collision first a month before and then overpriced the tickets and it just bollocks them. But Wrestle Dream, so you announced Wrestle Dream. I don't think it was officially announced this week, but it was kind of known. And all of a sudden the SmackDown debut on the 13th of September is in Seattle, just around the corner. Full Gear is currently clear, and then obviously we have this one with... World's End with the house show on exactly the same day, and then potentially Mania going to Vegas next year, which moves Double or Nothing. So I look at it and think pay-per-views are the most successful part of AEW's business now.
Yes.
And I think that's why they're targeting them. But there absolutely is a strategy. They are literally gone after every single show. And I look at it like, I used to work in retail. I used to be a retail manager for a long time, and we had this thing in the company that I worked for where they would build however many stores in a catchment area to control the market. So it was all about market share, and that's exactly what they're doing here. So if you buy tickets for one show, you're less likely to buy tickets for another. So you can reduce AEW's market share in that market and their potential audience, and then the numbers play into the perception that they're not successful. So I think it's quite a strong strategy, but that is what this is. And people going, oh, I've seen... our friend Prince sent us something from Reddit where they're going, well, they're going to compete against a house show. It's like, yeah, but this house show is on sale now.
Yep.
And they will market this hard. They will go after this hard. And I know, do you think, I'll ask you actually this question rather than me saying it, but do you think that AEW moving the date of World's End is giving in, or would you fight it on the day?
I'd probably fight it.
Okay.
I mean, it is a pay-per-view versus, I agree it is a house show. They will market the hell out of it. But I do think there's a point at which you kind of have to make a stand and say, look, we're not going to change our business. We'll do certain things that make sense for us. Obviously, the all-in thing being all out being one of them. But some of this stuff is just, you can't be constantly trying to cover for WWE going after you.
Sure. Okay. Because I sit on the other thing and I'd move it a week. I just don't see the benefit of going up against them when they'll throw everything at it.
Oh, they'll put everybody and their brother on there. Cena will probably show up.
They'll throw everything at it. And I don't know if it's worth doing. I just don't. I mean, they've kind of, and it probably doesn't help that they did move All Out. It shows that they will. And it makes sense for his business. And I think this is the thing. So as much as you'd want to fight it and you want to run head-to-head, it's easier when you're kind of hot. So when they were doing that I know. But when you were doing it in kind of 2021 going head-to-head, it made sense for AEW.
Yeah.
Now, in a situation where we are with the two companies, and I sound like Dave, number 2. But
it's hard to be number 2, Trish.
It's hard to be number 2. But, the reality is that you are, as we saw with the NXT thing with Dynamite last year, and we'll probably see this year, you are more likely to come out on the losing end. So why would you spend so much investing into that show, and when you could, take it elsewhere or move it, have a successful show, achieve all your objectives, and not have all that perception issue coming out of it?
Well, here's my question to you then. Okay. What's to say that they move it? What's to prevent WWE from moving the house show or just doing another one the same weekend?
Yeah, that's a fair point. You can only do so much, but the key is, I think, to get it on sale. And that's probably the mistake they made, because they announced it so many months ago. But as soon as they announced it, it should have gone on sale.
Yes.
And then you can negate this by leaving it kind of open there. It kind of made a target, put a bullseye on it. So, yeah, I think that's probably the thing, is if you are going to move it, you're going to do something, put it on sale straight away.
Yeah.
Then you don't get caught out by these things. But did you see exactly the same day, funny enough, that this announcement for Orlando was coming out, they ran an article in USA Today? Yeah. Jordan Mendoza.
The paper of record.
The paper of record. Yeah, so on exactly the same day, and when you can question antitrust, which we talked about a lot with the lawsuit for TKO last week, there was an article in USA Today on the TNA WWE partnership, and it was entitled "Business Done Right: Why the WWE TNA Partnership Has Been a Success." Right? Read some quotes. This is good. I quite like this. I did chuckle reading this. It's like it's an incredible puff piece. That prohibited portal has not only been opened, but the door was kicked down thanks to a new partnership with WWE and Total Nonstop Action Wrestling. This partnership between TNA and WWE has been the perfect example of business done right, Hendry told USA Today Sports. Business done right is when every single party wins. Right? I know. Okay. This next section, right?
Okay.
So, okay. What makes the WWE TNA partnership a success? As strange as it may seem for WWE to do a partnership, it's nothing new for TNA. It's worked with promotions all over the globe. Most recently, TNA worked with All Elite Wrestling from 2020 to 2021. Even though this is regular business for TNA, something about this deal with WWE feels different, and the talent notice it. Miguel didn't say which company it was, but a recent partnership didn't seem to benefit his workplace much. Quote, "The last time we did one of these crossovers, or likely working with another brand, it was very, very, very one-sided, in my opinion. I don't think TNA saw benefits from it." End quote. When the rumblings of partnership between WWE and TNA began, Miguel was reluctant to think it would be different. Turns out it's been, quote, quite the opposite.
So, I appreciate the part that, Joe Hendry is now, the voice of truth. We're just going to take quotes from wrestlers and run them in the paper without, actually doing any reporting or due diligence on whether this is actually true or not.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no. The words of Trey Miguel is... Yeah. Who, is enjoying featuring on NXT television.
Weird. Crazy.
Yeah, I massively enjoyed this little piece, because it was, I thought, if you look at it, right, and you think about antitrust and what we just talked about with the live events, and the fact that they got sued for antitrust by MLW once Stephanie McMahon nixed the Tubi deal.
Yeah.
This is an absolute thing that you've left out there, so you can stick this on the table if you're ever challenged on this. This is exactly what this is. But what I also thought about it was, so that section was entitled, "What Makes the WWE TNA Partnership a Success?" And that whole section is just a hit piece on AEW.
Yes. Well, especially the part that killed me is our most recent partnership. It was fucking New Japan, assholes. It wasn't AEW.
Oh, AAA New Japan. Take your pick.
Yeah.
New Japan one is now currently dormant, so that's kind of interesting when you think about the things on this. But what I wanted to ask, right, is so this thing, yeah, it was very, very, very one-sided. I don't think TNA saw benefits from it. Okay. Well, I don't really like kind of analysis without numbers. So I'm not very keen on it. So I thought I'd pull up all the numbers and let's talk about. So what I'll do is it'll run through what TNA saw in terms of their metrics from the AEW partnership. And then some of the other factors. And the same with WWE with TNA. And then we can look at and think, did they benefit more or less from each company? Right? Okay.
Yeah.
So Kenny Omega goes to TNA, the world champion, announces it the night he wins the world title on Winter is Coming. Huge successful show. The first episode did 221,000 viewers and 99,000 in the demo. God, we've seen Collision's lesson. Get in trouble for that one. His January quarter hours averaged 30,000 gain in viewers. Normally those quarters would gain 2,000 on average. His return in March 23rd gained 33,000 in the quarter, which was 28,000 more than the average for that quarter. Quarter one in 2021 for Impact Wrestling was up 2% like-for-like in total audience and 33% in the demo. Every month from January to April was up in like-for-like. They were the only show in 2021 to do that, including 136% in April. The go home for Rebellion was up 25% year on year. And Rebellion did 9 times the buyers for Bound for Glory and was the 8th biggest pay-per-view since August through in everything. Okay. Hard to Kill was the number 2 pay-per-view since leaving Spike. And the advertisements with Tony Khan put a decent amount of money in their pockets.
Okay, so tell me how Cody Rhodes and Roman Reigns' quarters on TNA have done. Because obviously they've sent, WWE's got this great partnership with TNA, so they're sending their world champions, right? Wait.
I don't know if they want even pace.
Oh, motherfucker. Okay, go on.
Did they want Ethan Page back? I don't know.
Oh, Jesus.
Okay, so in terms of the non-monetary things, so the only TNA talent that went on to AEW television was mostly Machine Guns a year later, to All Out 2022. Less mentioned about that match, the better. Yeah. And to be fair, I mean, they were going to go back and do trios with Kushida against the Elite, but we all know what happened. And the Good Brothers, who were all over AEW television for about 6 months.
All of us so grateful for that.
And then going the other way, obviously Kenny was huge for going across there for them, but the title was not lost in TNA from Kenny Omega. It went to Christian Cage on AEW Rampage, and then Christian he did go back and lose it to Alexander, who was then cashed in on in 5 minutes. So, you want to complain about it, but then look what you did, so that was kind of the summary of what TNA lost gained at that relationship. It kept them afloat. You want to talk about what it did? It kept people employed, and I think it did a huge amount. Kenny didn't have to go and do that. He didn't have to go and basically held up that company for a year. He held them up. I think he dragged them up. So I do find to say that they got nothing out of it, they got very, very little, is just it's a stupid statement. But for AEW, they did get some things out of it as well, because they looked like a groundbreaker. The whole Forbidden Door thing was unpredictable, and that was attractive. And I think that really kind of energized the audience. And for Kenny Omega, he was presented like a big star. And he took that presentation back to AEW. Yes. Like Double or Nothing 2021, he kind of figured that presentation out. So that was kind of really important to Kenny's title run, because then if you look at that after Double or Nothing, into the Jungle Boy thing, into the Hangman thing, whatever, that was when he was at his strongest. So it allowed him the time to do that in a much simpler presentation, which he's talked about. He always talks about wanting to be presented more like a Roman Reigns. So it really did do that. So they did get something out of it, AEW as well. But on balance, I think TNA got more out of their relationship. What do you think on that one?
I think that's pretty reasonable. I mean, I don't see how, Listen, there are some people who really like the Good Brothers, but I can't see how you're sending the Good Brothers and we're sending you our world champions, and which one of these is fine. I appreciate that whenever you have an unbalanced company crossover situation, we saw this a lot with New Japan fans as well this year, where they're just unhappy at the fact that they look, or their promotion appears to be smaller, or, they think that the bigger companies coming in and running stuff off. Like, I get it. Like, if you were a TNA fan and you thought this was bad, like, that's fair. But I think to say that this partnership is so much worse than what WWE is doing with TNA, that seems like a pretty ridiculous statement to me.
Yeah, so since WWE have gone in, we've had the likes of Joe Hendry, Jordan Grace, the Rascals on NXT television. So it probably has been more TNA talent on NXT television, and they've sent lower level NXT talent to Impact.
Yes.
So that's kind of been the kind of movement there. And then, I think in the article it says Joe Hendry says he's able to train at the Performance Center. The big key thing on that is how long does that go from training at the Performance Center to working at the Performance Center?
Yeah.
Always a key thing. And I can see why this relationship would exist, because their distribution arm is for a TKO affiliated company as well. So that kind of makes sense. And they had some financial benefits from it as well. So Slammiversary did 21,000 by Dave's latest kind of estimation. And that would be behind only the Omega pay-per-views and the one from the name change back in January. And it was up 115% from Rebellion. And then on June 13th, Impact was 127th in the daily rankings, which was their first entry into those since May 2nd. And it was the highest numbers since January of 92,000 and a 0.01. So you think about it, 200 how many thousand at the top? I've got to scroll up now. But all these numbers, I don't put them in order. It's really not a good idea. 221,000. Now we're kind of celebrating 92,000. So it gives you an idea of changing viewership. It did cause a spike in NXT viewership. WWE did get that. It's kind of falling back a little bit now, but they absolutely did. But for them, I think, from a WWE perspective, they get to swipe at AEW. They fucking love that. They get to take away something that was like a selling point with the, quote, prohibited portal. I'm sure Tanahashi didn't go to a restaurant called Prohibited Portal, but, whatever.
I'm redacting whatever. I'm not saying the joke I was going to make. Never mind.
The other thing that I think it does is that it creates the thing of having fresh faces.
Yes.
And that can be important sometimes. And I think, when we look at sometimes at AEW in the last year, one of their issues for me has been that, and this is where I think the 18 to 34 thing that Dave talks about is one thing that maybe we don't talk about enough, is they've had a lot of people come in or dominate TV who have been on TV for a very long time.
Yes.
With NXT, they don't have that. They have the opposite of that. And it was probably something of the attraction of AEW in the first couple of years. So, I think that works for them. Are TNA getting more out of this relationship or less than what they did with AEW? Or maybe the same. I don't know. Which one do you think?
I would probably lean towards the same or less. I think some of this is going to be borne out in terms of is Jordan Grace going to stay with TNA or is she going to go to WWE? It was the same for, like you said, with Joe Hendry. Where will TNA end up when this partnership ends or is cut back on for whatever reason, right? And is that going to be a place they're comfortable with? And if that's probably to me the bigger question than, I don't know. We'll see.
I think it's it all depends on how long it benefits WWE for. Is this just an antitrust thing, so you can do all these other things, and you can target AEW in all these other ways, but you can say, hey, no, we work with other companies. We're working with Pro Wrestling Noah and sending people to do the M1 and sending AJ Styles. We're working with TNA and have this relationship. We're not anti kind of other companies from being successful. In fact, no, we're helping them. So as long as this is hanging over their heads with the antitrust thing, I think this relationship will likely continue. Will it continue on NXT television? I think that's all ratings dependent, especially, once they move. Obviously, they're going to gear up for this debut at the Allstate Arena in Chicago with CM Punk. Jesus Christ. You know, and they're going to have an interesting thing of trying to get that venue kind of sold out. I think we've not had a first count for it yet, but it's definitely not going to, well, definitely wasn't a first day sellout. So we'll see how that does. But yeah, again, yeah, aim is there is just to hurt all out for me as well. And, but yeah, so they've got quite a lot going on. So I think TNA, you know, you always have to ask the question, what is TNA? What is their brand identity at this point? And, you know, if they see that being close to WWE just keeps them kind of solvent and keeps them going, then maybe that's all they're looking for. I don't see any benefit from AEW from working with TNA again.
No.
I don't think there's anybody that, you know, they would want or, you know, would make that worthwhile. So, yeah, it's, I think it's kind of similar. I think they got more financial benefit out of AEW that we know about, obviously.
Yeah.
Be careful with that one. But maybe there's more opportunities for their talent on television in NXT than there was for TNA talent in AEW. But I think it's interesting that they are willing to do these kind of puff pieces and allow their talent to do so as well.
What do you think, as we're sort of touching briefly on NXT and the premiere in Chicago, because obviously they're moving to the CW pretty soon. Where do you think they're going to end up ratings-wise? Right. Are we going to end up in a situation where, you know, they're seeing a spike in numbers consistently, or you think they're going to end up losing viewers?
It's a tough one. You know, the debut should do well. It will go up against the vice president debate, which is not ideal, but the debut will still do well. You know, these things always do tend to. After that, it will slowly kind of come down and then it will reach kind of a steady level. Probably what they're doing around now. You know, 0.17s, 0.18s. I don't think it's going to cause a huge influx in viewers in the long term.
No, and
I don't
think
see that.
The CW is network television, but they don't have the reach of the larger networks. So I think that's going to be that's a factor in the part where they're going to struggle a little bit. Is what I think. So, you know, I don't think you can say, oh, they're going to. It's like the equivalent of the SmackDown going to Fox, and all of a sudden they're going to get millions of viewers that they didn't have option of before. So,
sure.
I don't know. I think you're right in that their best case scenario is that they end up sort of staying where they're at right now.
Yeah, and that's successful for them. You know, and I look at that deal and it's the cost of that deal. And I think that's all about lessening the cost of AEW as well. I think they made that deal in light of that. So we'll see, obviously, when we get this deal eventually at some point, you know, how that kind of adds up monetarily. But yeah, I do think that's part of the reason, and that may be reason enough for them to do this, as well as saying, oh, we're on a network and we're keeping some sort of network kind of presence with SmackDown going across to USA in a few weeks' time. But yeah, the other part of the antitrust was is entitled contract tampering. So
the good old contract tampering situation. So many internet lawyers have been so excited to give opinions about this week.
Yeah, so Tony Khan was on the Dan Levitar's show on Friday, and he was asked if the contract tampering situation had got better or remained the same. And he said, in terms of getting better, I don't think that it has. I think that it's still happening, and I'll reserve all rights when it comes to that, but I don't think it's stopped, and I'll leave it at that. Contract tampering. So what would you say contract tampering actually is in professional wrestling?
Oh, Jesus. Well, I do think we need to define this, because I think a lot of people assume any communication between a contracted talent and, you know, people working for the other company is contract tampering. But I think you can point to examples of AEW, you know, clearly expressing interest in someone, you know, who worked at the other company through, you know, friends or wrestlers or whoever, and say, you know, I mean, you can look at, you know, Adam Copeland, like, how did he know that he would have a job at AEW if he let his contract lapse with, right? I mean, some of it you could say, well, this is an intelligent man who's not, you know, not young, and he's can figure it out. But I also think you kind of have a sense of like, okay, so there's contract tampering. What contract tampering is not is having sort of preliminary conversations with people around the time your deal is coming due, I think what contract tampering is, and even this gets touchy when you're talking about independent contractors, right? But I think if you say to someone, hey, get out of your deal, figure some way to get out of your deal and I'll hire you. I know you've got 3 or 4 years left, but come on back. I know we fired you. I know you got 3 years left on your deal. Come on back to us. Like, I think that sort of touches a little bit more on contract tampering than anything else. But in regards to any of this, it's difficult for me to, I as someone who feels that wrestlers should have more protections in terms of labor. I don't know that I can think that people having options or knowing what their options are for employment is a bad thing. So I don't know. Trish, what do you think the contract tampering is? Both of us, with our non-lawyers degrees.
No, my sentiment's pretty much very similar. So I think it's quite clear you've got to make a thing that there is no agreement. This isn't a sports league. There's no union with an agreement on kind of when you can talk to people.
Right.
When it's coming towards your end of your deal, then this isn't uncommon. Even someone like with AEW, someone like Matt Hardy has basically admitted that, that was done. And it's kind of normal. It's something that everybody does. And trying to claim that it isn't it? But you're right. So the example is, when you're talking to Andrade and all of a sudden he's fighting Sammy to try and get fired.
Right.
Or Malachi Black's trying to get out of his contract. Right. Oh, God, that will cause havoc because people say that wasn't true, right? It was true.
It was true.
It was true, yeah. And, they gave him proviso that you can go, but you can't wrestle for WWE for a certain length of time. And all of a sudden he's staying. And then obviously we'll see what happens with that this year. But It's like they are different. That is completely different from exploring your options at your end of your deal. In terms of
just in terms of like context, like I think this is an important part of like context being, there are things that you say, okay, this is a norm in my workplace and this is not a norm in my workplace. It is a norm in my workplace that when my contract is coming up, people from the other company are going to reach out and sort of see if I'm interested in leaving. It is not a norm in my workplace that someone is going to call and say, hey, try and get yourself fired so you can come work here, right? That's a part of it that I think people sometimes forget when they listen to conversations about stuff like this.
Yeah, and I can see people looking for a kind of competitive kind of viewpoint. It's that you can say that Tony's kind of got burned by this in the past.
Yes.
He didn't pick up Cody's option. Obviously he made that choice, and then obviously Cody going there was a huge, huge impact. He didn't sit CM Punk at home. Could have done that. Andrade beat Bryan Danielson and was gone 3 weeks later. It's kind of crazy. They had Jade on TV in the last week, and the next week she's walking out on TV over there. And sitting people at home is something that I'm not particularly fond of. And WWE does it a lot. It was a kind of a high profile thing with Brody Lee when he wanted to leave and then couldn't. And then they have that bad habit of what they do is make everybody rate and then release them all at the same time. And then the idea is that you flood the market so not everybody can be picked up. So and then obviously with AEW at the moment, you've got someone like Ricky Starks at home for whatever reason, obviously contracts running down. So there is this thing of sitting people at home when that decision hasn't been made. And then the other thing that there is some tacking on time. So in terms of the Lucha Brothers, it's very clear that Penta spoke to a number of people about potentially going to WWE.
Yep.
And is now kind of doing some damage control because they want Phoenix to not have time tacked on. It's kind of time tacking on is an interesting one because Tony's been kind of inconsistent with it.
Yes.
So they didn't tack it on with Jade. They didn't tack it on with, when obviously, but it seems they're not tacking it on with Bryan Danielson if he's believed that he's not in contract. They did tack it on with Kenny Omega. They did tack it on with Moxley's rehab, which he said he had no issue with, but they did tack it on. They did tack it on for Adam Page with his leave, and they did tack it on for guys like Brian Cage. So
Santana as well.
Santana, yeah. So there's this possibility that Phoenix could get an additional year of injury time. Do you think it's right to tack on time to performance contracts in this scenario?
I am, again, heavily torn on this, right?
Okay.
I think that if you are going to do it, it needs to be done, consistently, right? And I think you'd make that same argument. If you're not going to do it for Bryan Danielson, then you shouldn't be doing it for Kenny Omega, right? Like, what's the point of this? I can certainly understand, there's a situation, with Mike Santana, I think, where he was planning on leaving AEW. He did get injured at the end of his contract. If he had been let go, he would have, and not had the injury time tacked on, he would have not had a job, right? So there's some question as to whether or not some of this might be more kinder than not. I think a lot of this ties into, do these people want to stay working for you or not, right? And if somebody wants to go, and I understand the arguments the other way and all this other stuff, and like, this is a business and WWE is trying to screw you and yada, yada, yada. But I tend to not understand hanging on to someone if they don't want to be there anymore, right? And especially if you're just going to sit them at home for an extended period of time, right? So you want to say, okay, we can add injury time for Phoenix and Penta's going to be done and that'll be the end of it. And that sort of screws them. Like, I don't know is that the right thing to do, right? Like, I just don't know if it is. That sort of feels gross to me a little bit. And, again, that's just my opinion. I know other people will feel differently and say it's a wrestling war and you have to do and yada, yada. But, yeah, it just feels kind of gross.
Okay. I think it's complicated as well. So I know there's been talk about them not wanting to do business on the way out, which makes it more difficult. You can talk about the benefits of bringing somebody back before they leave or not.
Yep.
But you've got to look at it and say, okay, so if they add that time on, what are they going to do with him for the next year? And what are WWE going to do with Penta?
Right.
And then does that affect, or does adding the time on in this scenario affect your ability to pick up talent in the future? And especially talent, Mexican talent, let's be honest. So luchadors, how will it affect that? I think that's kind of something I would be mindful of as well. The luchadors were always a huge attraction for AEW and still are now. You look at the reaction we're getting for Beat Mortos, former Taurus, and Hologram, the former Aramis. So they've, and Roosh, and Bandido hopefully back at some point. So part of the attraction of AEW is to have talent from all across the world in the promotion. If you do something that kind of upsets that balance and WWE starts to be seen as the kind of destination for Mexican talent, is that a good thing? Is that something you want? Is it worth kind of damaging that relationship? Is that relationship damaged already? And Penta was pretty upset that they were kind of kept off shows when they were CMLL talent before they did that deal. And then eventually, they got to go and work in Mexico City. But that's the thing. It's like a balance, isn't it? And it's like, I get the war thing. That they want to go there now. It's out there that they want to go there now. And I think the perception that it's out there that they are getting kind of similar offers, but want to go to WWE. And then you have this thing of, we're going to tack on injury time. I don't know if that helps your perception. No. I don't know if it helps you. Okay, if they go straight across there and they make a huge impact, but why are they going there to start with? Have you done enough with them during the time they were in your company to keep them?
Well, that's the part, right? And that's what it boils down to. Like you said, what are you going to do with Phoenix for the next year if you decide you're going to keep him? Is he going to sit at home? Is he going to reject creative and say, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do, I don't want to do this. Or are you going to have some plan for him? Because if you don't, then what the fuck? Like, that's the part that I think is frustrating, because I think this was the thing that we all said was bad when WWE did it, right? When WWE made Brody Lee sit because they knew he was ready to leave for AEW, and how much of that man's life was lost because he had to sit there and wait and we didn't get to see him, this same type of thing. It just it doesn't feel right to me. And I get that it's complicated, and I'm not going to say that the same situation with a different wrestler and a slightly different circumstance, I'm not going to have a different answer for it. But I think, like you said, one of the things that we had at the beginning of AEW is how worker friendly it was, right? A lot of that advantage, the amount of time that you have to spend traveling, the number of dates you have, all that stuff seems to have gone out the window a little bit, right? So this would be another situation in which, have you given WWE somebody who, yes, you're going to lose them. That's a talent that you had that now people are going to go look at that. And it's not like WWE has done a tremendous job with the luchadors that they've had working for them either, right?
No.
Like, I think, right. We can point at the people that they're currently got it. And I think, Andrade went to WWE. I don't think he's lighting the world on fire right now.
Isn't he speed champion?
Yeah.
Whatever that is.
Yeah.
Twitter champion, ex-champion.
Right.
Whatever you want to call it, yeah.
So, like, you could also take the risk that you hand the Lucha Brothers to WWE and they don't, Triple H doesn't know what to do with them because they, redacted. But, like, that, I don't know. This is a very complicated gray area situation with a lot of, like, moving parts that I can't say that, I think you have to kind of look at it. And like you said, do you have something you can do with him? Like, what have you done with the Lucha Brothers, in the last 12 months? Right. So what is your plan for them for the next 12 months? And is it worth it enough to try and maybe mess up some of these relationships, like you said, with other Mexican talent?
So in terms of Penta and Phoenix, when they came into AEW in 2019, they were one of the hottest acts in the world and they turned down WWE. They had a WWE off on the table at the time. How would you assess their positioning and kind of their role in AEW over the last 5 years?
So I think they had a solid tag team run up to the point where they lost the tag titles, right? I think you could argue that to that point where they obviously they've had incredible matches. That all-out 21 steel cage match was incredible. They won the titles there. I don't think they had a particularly good title reign, but I also think that was suffered from the fact that they only seemed to phase FTR for some reason, and the chemistry between those two teams was just terrible, right? So so you can argue that they lost the point. As a tag team since then, yes, they had the best of they had, as a trios with Death Triangle, they had the best of 7 match with the Elite, and that was incredible, right? But, there wasn't a lot of meat in that, and necessarily from a story standpoint. I don't know. It was outstanding, but they haven't really done much since then, right? They were involved in the feud between Eddie and Best Friends and the BCC last year. That kind of didn't go anywhere in terms of All In. There was a lot of issues, I think, with Phoenix's
Visa.
Visa was a problem with that, right? And you can't say that there haven't been opportunities where maybe they were planning on doing stuff with these guys and they got injured. But I can't say that you can look at, especially as singles wrestlers, they seem to be in that echelon of guys that Tony Khan will throw them at a top of the card guy as a victory that they get on their way towards a title shot or something like that.
Yeah.
Right. And that's been the case since like 2021. Right. So, yeah. So I can't say that they've had I cannot say that their AEW run has been an unqualified, complete success. I also can't say that I think it's been unsuccessful.
Yeah. I think they've had their moments.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the first couple of years they were much better position. The Penta Phoenix match on Dynamite is something that sticks in my mind. The Penta Phoenix match with Hangman and Omega. Yep. And then obviously, you have the series with the Young Bucks, which ended at All Out 21, which is funny because if you remember the actual build for that match, we all thought it was going to be Jurassic Express, and then it kind of did. But the match was incredible. And then, from there, people say, oh, Phoenix had his run with the belt last year, but that was like complete accident. Come on now. And yes, they've had visa issues. They've had kind of injury issues, but there's been chances to convert them, to make them more, that I don't think was taken. Yeah. So it's one of them things where they've been successful, but I do think there was something left on the table, and it does feel like that. And now, they are in that point where they are kind of there to put other people over, and he's more focused on some of the newer luchadors that he's got.
Right.
And for them, when you look at your prospects, you've been here 5 years, what more can you do in this company? And other people are moving ahead of you. Right. So it does make sense for them to look elsewhere. And I think there's been a lot of discussion around, marketing with them. And I think that's kind of complicated. So they have a much more complicated situation than most people do because of the trademarks. So for anyone, this is stupidly complicated. But when Lucha Underground was running in the US, they had the kind of Pentagon Junior and Phoenix trademarks in the US. And now that's kind of merged with AAA, but AAA own those trademarks. So in terms of producing masks or merchandise or anything like that, it's complicated because they don't own it. The Lucha Brothers don't own it, and AEW don't own it. So it's made all that sort of thing much, much harder. So as much as normally you go, okay, merchandising hasn't done its job there, they are very limited in what they can do. And, the interesting thing was, the head guy in AAA talking about owning these trademarks and not giving it to kind of to them now that they're working CML dates. and the fact that they want to get in with WWE. So if they were to go to WWE, I would bet you that AAA would do a deal for them trademarks.
Oh, of course.
I will bet you. I will put money on that. I think that's part of all this, and why, you know, you've got Conan out kind of putting out sly tweets and shit. So, yeah, I look at it. So yes, you've got guys like Dragon Lee going to WWE doing absolutely nothing.
Right.
With Penta, in terms of marketing, you know, within a month, he's just going to be out on some field in San Francisco doing, you know, Zero Fear, Zero Meadow with George Kittle. That's going to happen, yeah? And then they will be able to market them and merchandise them and that sort of thing. So even if they do the similar role to what they are doing now, it's a change of scenery or revitalize them.
Yes.
And they have far more opportunities on that side. So I think there's enough for them to kind of look at it. I can't look at them and say, you should stay with AEW from a, you know, opportunity perspective.
Right.
I do think for them, there probably is more opportunity right now in WWE, even if they're used on a similar level because of the kind of benefits on the other side of things, you know, on the more commercial side of things. So, it's a difficult one because I think there's a couple things that look at this, and I don't think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think in the 5 years of AEW that they have been able to make a true non-English speaking star.
No, I think that's a fair statement. I think you can make that statement very clearly. AEW has really struggled with that, or struggled with it, or not put their, you know, whole body into it. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, and even like with the, you know, they've obtained one in Okada.
Yep.
And yet he's not really doing very much at the moment.
No.
So we're still not seeing him as a star or as a draw or anything like that. So, and that's kind of like a, you know, I hate WCW comparisons, but they had their kind of cruiserweight kind of international division, and it kind of segregated them, and then they never kind of produced that person. They had people on the edge, but they've never kind of got that across either. So I think that's something that probably sticks out to, you know, to some of those talent as well. And
well, if that's not an opportunity that you have with either company, then why not go someplace where you're going to have, you know, where the specific need you have in the moment isn't going to be served better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's been a lot of talk of people kind of going back and forth. And we talked about this every week and said, you know, people will go back and forth this summer.
Yes, they should.
So, you know, there's been talk about Lucha Brothers. There's been talk about Ricky Starks, which probably feels like a done deal. Yeah. There's even been talk about Daniel Garcia, which we believe is staying, but obviously it's talked about. So a couple of questions. There's also talk of AEW bringing in the former Hurt Business, you know, Lashley, Shelton Benjamin, MVP, and Ricochet is definitely coming in. So what do you think is the kind of, well, it's two-sided. What do you think the benefits are and what do you think the downsides are of this kind of swapping of talent?
So I should probably be clear that when it comes to people like the Lucha Brothers, and I'm, you know, a giant hypocrite, right? I'm not as particularly invested in someone like Ricky Starks as I am in the Lucha Brothers, so I care less about Ricky Starks being in a similar situation because I'm not going to be like, oh no, I'm bummed that I'm not going to get a Ricky Starks match. Hypocrite of me, where I will be bummed not to see a Lucha Brothers match. But I think in both cases, those are exactly the kind of guys who should be thinking about jumping, right? Because these are people who, you know, and we knew this was eventually going to happen on the AEW side, especially with WWE being, you know, in the position they're in right now. You have an opportunity at the other company. They want you. They're interested in you. Things, for whatever reason, have not worked out for you in AEW the way you wanted to, right? And I think for both, you can say, did they pull the trigger fully on the Lucha Brothers the way they should have? Probably not. I think there's an argument. People will debate the Ricky Starks thing endlessly. Some will say they didn't give him opportunities. Some will say that he gave him all those opportunities. But in both cases, regardless of what happened, it didn't work out. They're neither three of them are in the position that probably they would like to be at this point. There's greater opportunities for them if they jump. Good for them. Mm-hmm. I think the same is certainly true, you could argue, for the Hurt Business, for Ricochet. You know, I think there's an opportunity there. I think from my perspective as somebody who watches AEW and has seen, you know, a lot of WWE guys come in with varying successes and non-successes, you're sort of like, okay, who's going to lose TV time to the Hurt Business or the Hurt Syndicate or whatever? Is there going to be enough of a difference in presentation and gimmick and sensibility and like who these people are that you are going to be, you know, making me okay with missing a Takeshita, right? Or somebody else who's going to get downcycled so that, you know, we can have TV time for these guys, right? And I think we talk back to what we talked a little bit about at the beginning and some of the stuff that Dave has talked about this week in terms of like the freshness of people's gimmicks. We have people who've been on television with the same gimmicks for a long time, right? And so they feel stale even if they haven't been doing what they've been doing in this particular company. So, you know, and I think the other thing is we're not in a situation anymore, you know, and I think you can throw this back to, TDE, I think was somebody who made this point, and I want to give credit there. You know, we had a period of where we were going to fix mistakes that WWE made. We were excited to see wrestlers like Malachi Black and Brody Lee and other people join AEW because it was an opportunity for them to really get a chance that they didn't get in WWE. And so now you're in a situation where, like, do you feel like, does the WWE audience feel like WWE hasn't done a good job with these particular wrestlers? Does the AEW audience feel like these particular wrestlers haven't had a good job done? Like, you know, what are you going to bring to me as a viewer that I don't have already? And that's kind of the position that I'm in right now. I can't say that I'm particularly optimistic about it, although I would like to be more optimistic about it. I'm probably being unnecessarily cynical. Trish, argue it with me.
I think there's a difference between the feeling of people coming in because WWE no longer want them and people making a choice between the two companies. So early in the year, you had people with similar offers or choices. So we had like Ospreay, Okada, Mercedes, right? And they all chose to go to AEW. Yeah, some may have got offers, some may not, but they chose to go to AEW. So there was a different energy about it compared to, you know, people coming in because WWE no longer see anything in them. And yeah, that difference does come from how each company is doing. I think my biggest thing with this, and I know there's been a lot of talk, Dave loves to talk about 18 to 34. To be fair, we love to talk about 18 to 34.
We do like to talk about 18 to 34.
But
sure.
I do think that fresh faces is very important for 18 to 34. As much as they can be quite a nostalgic audience, you know, they really do feed off that. And when you look at this last year, I think very much so the balance of kind of old and new isn't kind of there. So, you know, we talked about when AEW started, they had a lot of kind of fresh faces or original people. And if you see them going to WWE and then the people coming in are people that you've seen for years and years on WWE television, you know, someone like Bobby Lashley on TNA or MVP on TNA television and WWE television, the same characters, and then they come into AEW. Yeah, that doesn't feel fresh. That feels like, you know, people coming in doing the same gimmick. Same way I hate the Undisputed Kingdom Adam Cole era stuff. I hate all of it because it's like you're the same guys. You know, if you change that character and you become something else, then, or even if it's just like a basic change, you look like Dean Ambrose or John Moxley, right? That's enough of a change. Or Chris Jericho, even, yeah, he changed all the time. But we do have this thing now where we have, you know, you've got Jericho, the main program. You've got, you know, for Swerve's World title challenges this year, he won it off Samoa Joe. You know, then he faced Claudio, then he faced Christian, he faced Roderick Strong, he faced one guy, Will Ospreay, and then he's got Danielson. Right. So it feels, you know, you've had Copeland all over the show, who took the belt off Christian. You know, it doesn't feel as youthful or as energized as it has probably in the past. The balance is maybe slightly off. And I think that is a reason why you're looking at 18 and 34 kind of gravitating towards WWE, where they're pushing kind of fresh characters. You know, they go big behind the kind of Rhea Ripley's, the Gunther's, that sort of thing. So I do think that that's the kind of thing that you've got to be careful of. It's absolutely normal to have movement from both sides. And I think that's something that people have got to get to grips with in a way that they haven't really been able to so far, that these movements are going to happen and going to come, but depending on opportunities. And right now you look at, you know, we always talk about AEW is very top heavy and WWE has more opportunity, especially probably in the mid card at current time. So you are going to see that go that way, then you also may see it go over, but you've got to be careful not to kind of age your roster in a way that they haven't had previously, when you've had, you know, 1, 2, 3 names from WWE and then you had a lot of people coming from independents like fresh. So how you get that balance right again is probably a big thing in that. And And it just depends how they're used. If they come in and everyone's all over television, they make no difference, and they make less of a difference than the people that they're replacing, then you have an issue. And I think that's some of the things we've seen this year as well. So, yeah, it's one of them. It's normal to have movement. But, yeah, you've just got to get the balance right. And I don't think just bringing people in solves anything. And we've seen that this year. They brought in some high-profile names, and they're 30% down on last year. Everyone wants to say got to be positive about everything, but actually, I used to I say this in meetings all the time. You got to be realistic, and the realistic part is they are successful in a number of ways. They'll be hugely successful. They get the TV deal that everyone's speaking about. They are doing 50,000 people at least in Wembley Stadium next week, and we'll talk about the other stadium bits in a second. But at the same time, they are dropping in metrics of popularity. I think Thurston always explains that quite well. So there's a difference between being successful and being more popular. And that's the kind of issue they've got at the moment. So they have a less engaged fan base.
Yes.
You can see that in ticket buying. You can see that in social interaction, whatever you want to look at. But they are going to be a successful company. But how do you keep that? You've got to keep a certain level of popularity in order to have those other things, to be able to look at site fees and that get into that sort of business. You've got to be able to look at it for, TV contracts. You get one, you've got to keep to a certain level. So yeah, that's the balance. But should we talk a bit? Do you want to say that I'm not doing the student? Can you do the accent? I'm not doing the accent. Do you want to?
Which?
Let's talk about the Texas thing without me having to say.
Oh, y'allin.
Y'allin.
I'm not exactly someone to do a Texas accent either, Trish. I don't know if you've noticed in our time together, but tend to be more aggressively northeastern than
the electric how did I butcher that so bad? The electric atmosphere of Globe Life.
The electric atmosphere of Globe Life Stadium.
I can't believe I butchered that the first time. I'm well unhappy. Yeah, so all in Texas. Saturday, 12th of July. Globe Life Field in Arlington, home of the Texas Rangers, their new ballpark. I've only been to the old one, so I don't...
The ballpark at Arlington.
Yeah. I went to the old one. I think I watched Prince Fielder hit like a ridiculous home run. It was $1 dog day, so I ate far too many hot dogs. And got burned, even though I had tons of... Anyway, yeah, this is a non-discretional story. But hey, they had nice ice cream in bucket hats. I like the ice cream in the hats.
I love ice cream in a hat. I love ice cream in a hat. If you take me to a baseball game, I am getting ice cream in a hat, non-negotiable. I want to make the little hat. I had a bunch of those.
They had they got a batting place. They had a batting place in the shopping centre in London. MLB Cave or whatever it was, and they did little ice cream in the hats, and I just go back every time and go, can I have another hat, please? But yeah, so anyway, completely digressed.
We've totally gone off the rails here.
Off the rail. But they had a press conference on Thursday with Arlington Mayor Jim Ross.
No relation.
No relation, but that's great, isn't it? To announce the event. Stadium has a retractable roof, thank fuck, because it's July in Texas.
Yeah.
And the setup is likely to be around 35,000. So we talked about this a few weeks ago about the prospect of doing a Texas show and not running Wembley when we kind of knew they were going to.
Yeah.
We'll just give it away. I don't know. This is what we do sometimes. We're telling you it without telling you it. There you go.
Yep.
But actually, no, before we start there, what's your kind of reaction to them announcing Globe Life?
I'm sort of torn. I think look, they've got to keep pushing. They've got to keep growing. You know, I agree with that. I think it's a positive thing. It is hard for me to look at their current advances on their ticket sales and think, oh boy, they're going to, I don't think they will have a challenge in selling tickets for this, just simply because destination events, tend to be more successful, even in slow times. I mean, again, you can say the same thing about All In right now, and they've sold 50,000 tickets at Wembley Stadium, which is an achievement, at the 48,000, whatever it is. Jesus Christ, leave me alone. But it's still difficult to it sort of makes you raise an eyebrow a little bit and be like, okay, sure. And I also found it interesting who was at the announcement and who was doing the throwing out of stuff for it versus who wasn't.
Okay.
I don't know. That was kind of the thing that sort of struck me as I was looking at it. But what are your thoughts on this?
I think the most important thing in the whole press release was them saying that there'll be a series of events in Arlington leading up to the event.
Yes.
And the reason for that is not just that, the residency has been pretty successful. From a visual perspective on TV, the sound, the audio, maybe not so much, but in terms of selling tickets and presenting Collision in a certain way.
People were convinced they were not going to be able to sell 800 tickets, especially towards the end, and they topped 1,000 for pretty much everything, I think, except one event. So from that perspective, it has to be considered successful.
Yeah, and they needed a minimum of 650 to be profitable without knowing how much Arlington were paying for the events as well. Right. So with the discount, so the likelihood is it was much less than that. So they made a good profit off this as well, which is, they're definitely get really weird about the term cost cutting, but they are definitely controlling the purse strings until they know exactly how much money they have next year, which is sensible. So It did work for them. The big thing about this is not only could you run other events in the meantime, but if you make that week a thing and you make it a destination, and this is what TKO are talking about, which is really sensible. They do it with every pay-per-view. They have a series of events that week. People are much more likely to fly in.
Yes.
That WrestleMania week thing has been an attraction for a decade now, and it works. I've been to WrestleManias where I haven't watched WWE product for 10 months beforehand. I might have seen 5 minutes, but you don't care because it's that whole thing of that whole experience of the week. And that's what people buy into. And that encourages people not just to go to a show, but also to kind of go to a town and spend a week. And that's your key for your site fees. Right. And that's what I kind of probably didn't talk enough about when we talked about Wembley last week with potentially for WWE for WrestleMania. That is the difference. That is what will get a city to pay for you. Is because you're going to bring people in there, not for one day, not for half a day, but for multiple days. And you're going to bring people in from different locations, perhaps globally, So that's where that bit is really important. I thought that was something I really wanted to see. You also have this thing where you've done a Collision residency and you're going to do other kind of things in the area. It's good because you're generating this big local base. And they've always been pretty strong in that area. Garland's always done pretty well. 6,000 top for the Curtis Colwell Civic Center. I always like to look at their ticket map. I love that ticket map. That's a weird thing to say. But they've always done pretty well. So you're cultivating this local kind of audience and that you're kind of managing their loyalty with doing these shows in Arlington. And that gives you a big local base to buy tickets. So it'll give you that kind of boost at the very start. And I don't think there's going to be any issue with this. And yes, their TV for kind of TV attendance numbers coming up aren't great. But you look at it, you can see the same thing. So you look at Wembley Stadium, 48,000 now that WrestleTix has been able to correct some issues he's had with the upper tier. And you look at Cardiff, and they're not, they're around 4. So you can see the difference between TV and destination stadium event quite clearly. And moving into these markets, they're talking about potentially running something in Australia. They seem to be kind of putting some press out to try and get some bids last week. And they're running Wrestle Dynasty, which Michael Nakazawa was talking about hopefully having Kenny Omega back for, which would be a huge part for that draw.
Jesus. So
they are moving into that destination kind of model that WWE kind of moved into in 2019, 2020, before the pandemic. So that is the model they are working to. And that means that, if you are struggling domestically with tickets and that sort of thing, you can still be successful in this way. So I don't blame them for that. I think it's adventurous. It's good for, I think, the US to have one of these big shows. It probably does mean the calendar is about All In now. All In is set up like their Tokyo Dome, their WrestleMania. I know there's people that want the pay-per-views to all be equal, but they're not. They're not, okay? No. So this is now their big show. I am really glad, though, is that it's in a ballpark because ballparks are so much better for sightlines than football stadiums.
Yes.
Football stadiums are so bad for watching wrestling in. I even look at, last time I went to a ballpark wrestling show was the Royal Rumble in 2019 at Chase Field in Phoenix, Arizona. And that one was 40,000 with 32,000 paid. So that's kind of the number you're competing with, and WWE was struggling for domestic attendance during that period, so that's probably a comparable. So I think they can do it. I think it's wise to leave Wembley fallow, as we said last week.
Yeah.
Did you see people say, "Oh, SummerSlam will be there next year"? I believe Brandon Thurston says that SummerSlam will be at MetLife Stadium next year, so that's not happening. And the mayor wants WrestleMania. If it's not WrestleMania, it's not good.
No.
I think it's a wise thing to do. They've also said that they're going to do an alternative event in the UK next year. So not saying the UK is getting nothing. So hopefully that alleviates some kind of feeling.
You get nothing.
You get nothing.
You get nothing. And
get on a plane. Get on a plane. Fly to Texas. A local buying audience was very important for WrestleMania 32. So you've picked the right market for that. It's easy to fly into. I love Dallas. I love Fort Worth. They're good destinations to try and get international visitors in as well. So but they're going to do something in the UK next year. And I think the idea as well is to try and spike all-in ticket sales for this year. Like, we're not doing a stadium show next year, so come this year. Let's get that 48,000 to 55 distributed by next Sunday. So they'll definitely try and use that as kind of impetus. Which kind of brings us on to All In this year. All right. I'm going to let you talk on this, and I might talk.
I think that, look, we talked about this, especially in comparison to like WWE, right? WWE runs a stadium show with 45 or 55,000 people, and it's considered a success. And I want to stand by that. Like, from a ticket buyer perspective, All In is a success.
Yes.
Right? You'd like to see them get to 55, but what they're doing now, it's a success. I think there's been better build for some of the matches on the show than others. We'll go from there, right? Okay. I still, Trish, have absolutely no idea and continue to be completely and totally boggled and baffled. Like you said, we're going to make the All In this premiere event for, could we do something with it this year instead of like we have a plan on what we're going to do and maybe a plan about who's going to say what and when, because, I understand that there are people that think that the build to this Bryan Danielson Swerve match has been good, but I'm not one of them. And I'm just baffled by this, right? It got slightly better last week. Obviously, Danielson did a great post-show promo, and it made sense that it was after the show was over because the post-match beatdown and the whole thing was valid, and like Danielson actually woke up and expressed some emotion, and that was great. So we have not seen that on television. They did not air it last night on Collision for some reason, and instead we had Eddie Kingston giving a babyface promo about how Bryan Danielson should care about the match.
Okay, right. So my summary is this, right? They've struggled with the bill for this match until the previous week. I think they completely fucked with the stipulation. They're talking about not being under contract, talking about, potentially only being a transitional run if he wins because I'm getting surgery. All that stuff has just kind of muddied the waters pretty poorly. And, it's not a draw. It's not going to sell any more tickets. I think the build is kind of adequate if we get to a more personal level, which it looked like it was with Danielson's promo, which needs to be on TV. There's this thing that people say, it doesn't matter if it's on social media. Well, the last time they did a promo with him on social media, they put it on YouTube, 150,000 people watching. They went into the town the next week and they had no fucking idea what he'd said, and he'd said it on that interview. This stuff has to be on TV because your audience isn't as engaged as it once was and isn't following the content in the way it once was outside of your TV. So it has to be on TV. And something like that is so critical in this build because of the issues they've had. If you make it more personal, it's going to do better than whatever else is going on with, he's going to try, essentially, Orange Cassidy Revolution 2020.
It's where we're at, right?
Yeah.
We got to talk you into caring about, what the...
Yeah, no, we don't need to do that. So get this thing that's more personal and get it on TV on Wednesday. No excuses. It has to be on TV. It's the best thing he's done in this build. It needs to be on TV, okay? Second thing. No interviews. I'm sorry, I get it. But please, every single interview gets worse and it messes things up and it makes things more complicated. Tell the story like it's a simple story. The difference when you look at something like Sting's retirement was it was a really, really simple story, right? So you have, this is guy's going to be his last match. Here's your heel face dynamic. That's it. Here's the stakes. Simple, easy to market, easy to interview. Everything else is just getting muddy. Let Swerve do some press this week. Danielson's been out on a press thing for, Swerve can go out and do some press. He's good at it. He's great. In fact, he's great at it. He's a really good talker. He's really good at getting his kind of stories across, character across. Let him go out and do some press. I don't know. But that's definitely something on it.
That's one of the things that's been most frustrating for me about this, right? This build for this match, I've been more impressed with Swerve and less impressed with Bryan Danielson, which is fine, right? C'est la vie. The issue is that I'm seeing more of Bryan Danielson and less of Swerve. And I think the thing I'm most frustrated by is how it doesn't seem like this needs to be Swerve. Like, Swerve is irrelevant almost as far as Bryan Danielson is concerned with this build. Like I say, it got a little bit better on Wednesday, but you could, he could be fighting anyone and we could be doing the exact same thing we're doing right now, which is not mentioning him at all, which is not really engaging with him at all. It's just about Danielson and Danielson's career possibly ending. And that I find really frustrating.
Yeah, you've got to make it more personal. I think Strickland has done an incredible job.
He's absolutely incredible.
The best opportunity, make the best out of these opportunities. And the fact that, we shouldn't look past that. It's a huge achievement for him to be in the main event at Wembley Stadium. And he's earned it. He's worked incredibly hard with his run. He's got some support. I think it's probably lessened a little bit since Max came back. But, he's grasping everything he can. The biggest issue, I think, with it is, and it comes twofold. So you have this character of Swerve who, his actions play the tweener line. But in terms of what they want you to feel about him, right? So not the character. So yes, you can say in character, these actions are, coherent, they make sense. But they have taken their number one babyface from Forbidden Door, and he's the guy working super heel. And yes, from a character perspective, you can see how that would work. But you are fighting the fan base to get them to cheer somebody else over the guy that's the top babyface, who then has to carry the company in the future. And that element it's difficult. So I'm not sure how well that works for the long term, but I guess we'll see. And that's the thing. So this is kind of a moment versus kind of long-term outlook. And maybe that's the difference in the correlation or the feeling. But yeah, it's kind of, it's not a hot match, but it's going to be an adequate main event. It'll get good. It's not a hot match. Right?
No, give me one adequate main event. Like, Jesus God. No, I get it, but like, give me A.
No, but give me one. There's not one metric that says it's hot.
No.
So it's not like last year. That was a hot main event. Well, whatever. But it's, it is a main event. It can stand up on the top of that card, and people go, "Okay, that's the main event. Title versus career. You got to step." The dynamics don't quite work for me, but I can understand them working for anyone else, especially if you have that connection with Bryan Danielson. I read the thread from Trevor Dame this week where he talks about, really wanting Danielson to be the kind of center of everything for the first time in his career. And I'm not even sure he will be in this, but I can see that. And I'm sure from that kind of theatrical point, everyone's going to love singing Final Countdown. It's incredible for Swerve to be in this kind of match and this opportunity. I'm sure he'll have some kind of killer entrance. He's got to beat last year, because last year was some pretty incredible. Just stop him doing fucking interviews. Like, stop fucking talking. Stop telling Dave Meltzer that, like, you put out an interview, like, and it came out months later, which is kind of weird because I think we knew about this in April. So, okay. Just stop all that stuff. Let Swerve do that sort of stuff and get that personal stuff on TV. Turn it into a personal angle. It's very similar to the MJF build for Revolution in last year. It's
extremely similar to that.
So it's only really kind of felt something when it's gone to a personal thing. Before then, it was like, it's exactly the same. It feels exactly the same. You just got to focus on that and make that the focus of this last week, and then see what you can do. I'm going to ask you about it because we've got to do it. Publicly, the news went out this week of something we've known for a couple of weeks now, that there's plans for Adam Page and Swerve Strickland at All Out.
You could get me in trouble. Oh my God.
And so you made a tweet.
Oh God, Jesus Christmas. We're never doing this.
No, look, so a lot of people wanted to kind of, the word build seems to set people off, but I think like
the word build seems to set people off.
Yeah, if you want to say turnaround, or you want to say like time when the match is actually focused on, whatever you want to say, that's what it actually means. Not like, oh, we don't know, there's been a story for a year. Like, behave yourself. So
it was kind of funny though.
Listen,
if I make a point and everybody and their brother disagrees with me, then either I made the point poorly and didn't get across what I was trying to say, or everybody just disagrees with me. What can I tell you? No, I think that a build for a match that is specifically happening in a feud are two separate things. But clearly I didn't express myself on that one very well, which is fine. I think a 2-week specific build for this specific match, and then it's going to be done and we're going to move on to other things. Like, you know, we were assured that there was a longer term plan for this. Everybody was insisting that this was going to be a long-term situation and a setup, and instead we're going to flip this sucker around and sell it in Chicago. Fine. Right? Like, this is what, you know, we got to do the rest. We got to do the Wembley moment is what we're Twitter pushing for now.
No, but it is a moment. So, you know, Dave Meltzer somehow kind of explain this in Observer on Friday, because I read the sentence like 6 times and I was like I get what he's saying, but that's not English. Jesus Christ. But
tortured clauses and 700 things.
No, but what he says was, you know, if they knew that Danielson was going to need surgery, which they allegedly do, and he was only going to have a transitional run, which is kind of what always the talk was, then they should have, you know, for a long-term perspective, they should have gone with, he said, Ospreay and Page, or Page in that spot. And your sentiment is kind of similar. So you're looking at what is the best way to get the most out of this program, which is the hottest program you have available in your company? What is the best situation? You know, the more you build it, you bring your TV numbers up. You're putting it on a pay-per-view that's 2 weeks after the last one, which is traditionally, you know, one of the ones that struggles the most in a year. You're putting it in a market that's, you know, got major competition, and you're going to only give 2 weeks to sell the tickets. And they struggled with that when they did the Moxley Punk thing, which didn't sell out for All Out 2022.
Nope.
And did a reasonable buy rate, but much down from Double or Nothing. So you are putting more pressure on the matchup. Are you giving it everything you can to promote it, to make these wrestlers bigger as draws so then they can carry the company forward? Or are you producing a moment? And that's kind of thing. So when I look at, like, you look at Revolution like this year, that Sting match and that moment was the best best moment of the year, yeah?
Yes.
Okay. So, but the issue that they had was you created this incredible moment, but then coming out of it, everything was weak.
Yeah.
And this is why you saw that kind of, so everyone says, oh, it's Sting going that causes downturn. No, it was a number of things, but I think not being able to carry that momentum was, you know, very important. So you had, you know, Darby comes out of that match, he's beaten straight away by Jay White, and then Jay White's not used for anything. So you lose that momentum out of Darby coming out as the victor. The Bucks went into that kind of very drab tag team tournament for Dynasty, and then they did the angle, you know, and you could say, okay, they got the benefit because look at the buy rate for Double or Nothing. So they got the buy rate out, and then they did nothing with them. And now we have people talking about their limited dates deals and stuff when, you know, they're pretty much on TV most weeks. And, you know, yeah, they have on their dates, but it's like, it's far blown kind of out of proportion in terms of what they're actually doing. That's just about booking. You know, I talk about tag team booking and tag team division. That's about booking. They need to book it better. More than anything else. I've digressed. And then you also had, you know, you had the Strickland Page story with Joe, and then you take Page out of it and that becomes weaker. So this is what you kind of had with Revolution, that we never took advantage of kind of that moment or that situation. And, they've got to do a thing where they've got to flood the press this year. They couldn't use ESPN last year because of that stupid punk interview. So hopefully they can use them this year. They've got to throw the local press. You've got to do as much to make noise as possible, because coming out of that, WWE are going to amp up. They've got the SmackDown debut, you've got the NXT debut, the Netflix debut, So they are going to absolutely ramp up their media. So this is your opportunity to kind of get as much of that positive news out and everything, but also to try to build these people to carry your company forward. Because as much as you get this TV deal, you still have to live up to a certain thing. You still have to, to get these site fees, you still have to put a number of people in the building. So you need to make these people into draws that are going to take you forward, and then you lose all these names. Bringing in Mick Carter's and WWE isn't going to cut that. It's not going to do it. So that's the difference. Is what you're talking about is maximizing people to go forward to the future, and what they're talking about is moments.
Well, it's similar to what's sort of frustrating me right now so much about the way that they're not centering Swerve as much as they could be in this feud with Danielson, right? Because you have to have Swerve. Swerve is there, right? Danielson is done. He's, even if he wins, he's, like you said, it's just still a lot of conversation. I mean, you can't rule out that it's all bullshit, but a lot of conversations, transitional champion, and this is that, and blah, blah, right? So you have Swerve is the young guy. He's like one of your top babyface, as you said. Like, what is there for him with this over with? Like, what's the focus on it? What can he point back to? What can he talk about? Like, that's the thing that I think is really frustrating, is that it's like, okay, we have this, but like, how are you going to play it off of this to help you and help these specific young people moving forward? And I feel like that's lost, right? Like, you don't see that, and it's frustrating.
I think that's what we talked about with a potential heel turn, and then Swerve would have to pick it back up. He would have to be the chaser in order to kind of get that thing. So my key thing is, if they go with Danielson winning, which would probably still be the favorite. Yeah. Yeah. If they go with Danielson winning, then he should put somebody over from that kind of group next up. Not somebody like a John Moxley. Let's throw that out there, because everyone fucking knows it's fine. Yeah. Going from one of those kind of guys to another one of those kind of guys is not going to get anything out of this. And, the Sting moment was fantastic, and I wouldn't take it away, but in traditional terms, actually say, like, he didn't put anyone over on the way on there, but he wasn't on his back. I
know the Tunnel Talk girls are desperate to see someone go out on their back.
I'm just popping Leah for the sake of it now. So but that would be the traditional thing, and they took the moment, but they could have done more coming out of it. But if you are going to go with Bryan Danielson here and you are going to do a quick run, fine. But you need to protect Swerve, and then you also need to make somebody else out of it, whether you goes back to Swerve or you want to do the thing with Darby because he's a Grand Slam, whatever you want to do, or whoever's going to win the chip, which we'll talk about in a second. You've got to think about that. The other thing, I said chip, right? Yeah. The other thing is kind of, let's talk about the Hangman. So, when Adam Page come back, he was not aimed towards Swerve Strickland. There's never been, as far as we've ever had conversations about, that he was going to be involved in Strickland's title reign. I was trying to think this earlier. So the idea was he'd come back, he'd lose to Bryan Danielson, then go to the Elite for blood and guts, and then you spin him off and you take him away. And you can see where he was going, because there's one guy without a huge profile match on the card. It's not fucking hard. It's not rocket science, is it?
That man is not Jeff Jarrett, by the way.
I see Jeff Jarrett do a Rainmaker. No. As long as it's not a money clip. Like, fuck off.
I was about to say.
Yeah, fuck off with your money clips, you 2020 G1 bollocks. I hate that fucking.
All right, Zach, calm down.
Not Zach. How dare we? Thank God for fucking Essex. I came from Canby Island. Anyway, right. Is he from Essex? Canby Island, Essex? I don't fucking know. He's in Kent. Anyway, Holly Sheppy. I've completely gone off my brain now. No, so
Hangman,
right, okay.
Where he was going.
Yeah. Okay. And then there was kind of a little switch around Blood and Guts. So you noticed it like the week before, they went from kind of not having him across to material opposite Swerve, and then they switched it.
Right.
And then in the match, he's the guy holding up the title in his face, which is, I love when it was, it's not about the title, and then he's just like literally in his face, and they still say it's not about the title. We'll talk about it. It's fucking die. But they made that interaction. They did an interaction in the match, and then the key thing. So the one that had my eyebrows raised at the time was then they had him attack Jeff Jarrett in the Rampage battle.
Right.
Now this character, you have to be careful. So he attacked him in the Battle Royal. He didn't enter the Battle Royal for a title shot. That kind of made him look a bit deaf. They did the open challenge on Collision, and people were pretending that people were angry it was Ishii in a match with Swerve. But no, people were angry. They thought his character looks like a fucking idiot because he has this opportunity to take things from Swerve and he isn't there. That was like, I love this thing of being angry about things that people aren't actually angry about. It's one of my favorite things.
It is. I do enjoy when people have arguments about things that people aren't actually saying.
Yeah, and that's one of them. So the idea is this character has looked a little bit of an idiot, a little bit of a loser, and now he's kind of becoming more focused, right? So he beats Jay Lethal. And now there's this gauntlet match with a chip, with a world title shot. And we've already got someone lined up with a world title shot for Grand Slam. And he's doing promos saying, I'm going to get what I want. And what he's talked about, what he wants, is costing Swerve everything. So, if you're going to like this, he has to be involved with this Danielson Swerve outcome in some way for the character. Yeah. And that does not mean that he has to win the belt. Let's be very clear, because everyone seems to get this really mixed up. No, it means that he has to be involved in some way. It could be as simple as, stopping Swerve from using a weapon like he did in the Danielson match back in the show that first NXT. It can be that simple. But he has to play a role, and you need that because you're going to need an impetus and a stake to take that into All Out.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
So keep an eye on Hangman. Yeah, it's a funny one because this is a guy that he can't even get on any marketing for the show to save his life. But he's going to be involved in some way that I can't see how he isn't. You just kill the character otherwise. So one way or another, and I think the gauntlet's kind of being underplayed in terms of what they're doing, and that's an interesting one. It's an interesting one that is there when they've already set up 2 world title challenges.
Yeah.
But also it's interesting that kind of they're underplaying it. They've not really kind of talked about it much, but also people aren't kind of realizing what that could be and what they could do. So I think that's something to kind of keep an eye on next week when it comes to that. In terms of potential things, so obviously we were at Forbidden Door and we had the return of Britt Baker, which was the loudest pop of the night by my pathetic little ears. I think there's a possibility of seeing not just debuts, but more importantly, I think some returns on this show.
Yeah. I think you have to look for that, definitely.
Yeah. So what do you think is... So, and they didn't really do this last year. So last year kind of missed the big debuts or returns or kind of things to carry the show out of the pay-per-view. And so I'll give you 3 names.
Ooh.
I want you to rank them in the... That sounds so awful.
Ooh.
In the order that you think they're most likely to be on the show.
Okay.
Okay?
Go.
Okay. John Moxley, Jamie Hayter, Kenny Omega.
Ooh. I'm going with Moxley most likely,
Okay.
Hayter second most likely, Kenny least likely.
Right.
Are you going to rank them, Trish? Or do you think I'm like...
You want me to do it?
Yeah, go.
Okay. Jamie Hayter, Kenny Omega, John Moxley.
Interesting. Oh, I love this.
So I think Jamie's... It's all gone very quiet around her.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting thing when that happens. You can see potential setup with Soraya and stuff there. So I can see that.
That would be nice. That would be nice.
Kenny's maybe more wishful thinking than everyone, but it's good to hear that he's back trying to do something physically now, post-surgery. But you can always do a moment, you can always do something come out. It wouldn't doesn't necessarily need to do anything physical. He could just run off Okada for all things, you know? He could do... There's so many things you could do there.
I think anything is possible. I just feel like with Kenny, and I could be reading this totally wrong, I just have... with his previous injuries and stuff, he hasn't really been there unless he's been willing to, you know what I mean? To, you know, with the exception, obviously, of getting written off in Winnipeg. But I just have a hard time seeing him coming back before he's ready to be wrestling.
That makes sense. And then with Mox, I know Brian Alvarez doesn't think he's going to be anywhere near the gauntlet. But, you know, he's coming back at some point in the near future, hopefully. And once they work things out with him. And does it fit Wembley? You know, he's kind of... I know he's still on the posters. He's not on any of the kind of the videos and stuff they're doing for Wembley now. They've kind of moved him off of that. So unless he's in the gauntlet, you can't really, you know, he's just going to stand in Danielson. You can't see him coming across a stand in Danielson's corner. It's just not... No.
Not his personality.
Wow. But yeah, so yeah, I'm going to go that order. I'm going to go, I think Hayter will be there. I do think Hayter will be there. And then we'll go with, that order, Kenny and then Moxley. I'll throw another one. Do you think there'll be any debuts in that gauntlet?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. 100%. 100%. I absolutely think there'll be debuts in the gauntlet. I think that's the perfect spot for it and why you wouldn't do it there. It makes a lot of sense to me.
Okay. Okay.
What do you think?
What do I think? Yeah, I think a Ricochet or something. Or,
Ricochet makes the most sense to me.
Yeah.
Because you can also set him up with whoever you want him to feud with to start, right?
Yeah, and he's going to come in and do, like, crazy shit
right.
in that spot. So, you know, that's something where them gauntlets are really useful for.
Right.
And so, yeah, just do that, you know, like just throw them all in.
Hopefully Jeff Jarrett is his first. No, I'm just I'm sorry.
Yeah, aging show. That's kind of the point, right? He was never going to be on TV. Like, do you remember that promise? Oh, Jesus Christ.
They should have won the whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah, no, so that's all in. Should be an interesting show. We'll come back to it week after next. Anyone going, have a very good time. Enjoy seeing everybody, because I think that's the general excitement that we're feeling, is everyone going to see everybody and getting to spend some time just around wrestling and enjoying wrestling with each other. So if you are heading to London town.
Can I remind you, you're the actual British person? That was a full-on American freak out about London.
Like that. Can I remind you, you're the actual British person?
You are the actual British person with a T.
Yeah, I'm the miserable bitch. That's how this works. That's how this works in the UK, isn't it? Right? Yeah, no. No, but yeah, I hope everyone travels safely and enjoys the weekend. Stadium shows are always fun. So
and the electric atmosphere of Wembley Stadium.
Nah. I can always take or leave Wembley. That sounds like I'm too fucking overwhelmed. I've done too many times. I like smaller stadiums more, I think. But no, it is, for a lot of people, it's a very special place. And it's always something to go there. So, yeah, let's hopefully they have a very good show. They get a lot out of it. It moves forward, progress into the final year. We get the fucking TV deal, so I don't have to hear.
Oh, God. Can they just freaking announce this thing already?
Yeah. Hopefully it's under the hat he was wearing on the Dan Le Batard show, the WWE hat. But, there we go. Can I talk about the G1?
Yes, please talk about the G1, Trish.
Yeah.
Please talk about the G1. It finished today.
Yes.
Completed.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question for you about it, too.
Oh, my.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, there's definitely lots to talk about. So we'll do the boring business side first, because, I like to do some numbers. So this year's G1 total attendance of 48,683, down about $5,000 from last year. Average attendance 2,562 compared to 2,801 last year. And actually, most of that comes from the finals. So finals this year did 13,396 across 2 days. Ryogoku Kukuki-Kon, Sumo Hall. I love that place. And last year did 14,862. And I wouldn't knock that too much because this year, you had Zach and Suji. And last year you had Tetsuya Naito going for winning the G1 for Destino or whatever. So, that's not horrendous. You can't compare that and say it's the same thing. So it's not horrendous. Average outside of the non-finals was about 150, 160 between the two. So when I looked at it, I thought I'd have a look at some markets as well, because that's the best way of doing it. So this year, they didn't have Otta Gymnasium in Tokyo as a third Tokyo show. They ran a poorer venue in Chiba that kind of cost them. So if I do the markets that were kind of the same, the markets were Osaka, Hiroshima, Takamatsu, Nagoya, Korakuen, Yokohama, Sendai, Nagaoka, Hamamatsu, and Ryogoku. They were basically up in 5, down in 5. And if you add all the attendances up, so market to market, they were up by 12 people this year. Well, woo! But no, so I think that's probably a better measure. So I can look at it and you can say, okay, they were down significantly on last year. But when you look into where they were running and where they were booking, it's probably about the same, which is probably an achievement considering that last year, they got a better number in Nagoya because Sanada is the hometown guy there and he was champion. And they had Tetsuya Naito chasing. So that's always going to help your numbers for when it comes to the finals. But yeah, so I thought this was a really well-booked tournament. I thought it was just, there were so many people that stepped up. Going back to 2 blocks of 10 was fucking amazing. The M1 style kind of formula they used last year just didn't work. And there was no as much filler. And I think, Narita was probably the weakest guy with Jake Lee. No charisma, no hat. No hat, no charisma, maybe. Other way around. But in general, there was a lot of people that stepped up. I think having someone like Taichi not be involved and Tanahashi obviously stepping out, Ishii not being involved, made other people step up. We had Sanada putting in great matches with Naito and Shingo. We had Great Okan stepping up and pretending that he actually wanted to be a wrestler again, which that was nice. We had a real focus on the Musketeers, on the younger guys. Umura was great until his injury, which was pretty the only real serious injury that came out of the tournament. They did very well to kind of avoid that so much this year. Sanada still only has one shoulder, bless him. He should have got surgery last year. He's got like one big arm and one little arm. It's like, oh, Sanada, that's very cute. But yeah, there was a lot of people that stepped up. Finley was very good in this tournament. And, the only probably disappointment for me was I think Shota Umino is one needs to go heel. There was a point where Korakuen, I know it's Naito, but Naito's actually got his foot on his neck, and the crowd are like, Naito, you're not a baby face. They're trying to do the mega entrance. So me and Amy and I watching the shows on in our group chat were very much doing, we were judging Shota's smile at his entrance to see if he had his loser face or
boo-boo
not.
face, yeah.
So yeah, he definitely needs to move heel. Gabe Kidd really stepped up. He looks like, they're already playing into him turning babyface and he will be over as babyface. What level that reaches, I don't know. And then we get all the way through to the final today. And, if you looked at the way it was booked going in, you saw that Zach had beaten Naito back on day 1 or day 2? Day 2. And it was holding up the belt in the crowd. And you thought, okay, we got Royal Quest coming up, just announced for October 20th from Crystal Palace in London. So he'll just get a title shot then, right? So you kind of had this presumption that that's what would happen. So, and then he was booked really, really strong. So the stronger you're booked in a group, the more likely you are to not make the final or not win the tournament. So instead, they've gone with him winning the tournament after being booked strong, which is probably a good thing because, he's been booked as a mid-carder for so long. It's really hard to escape that. But then they said, he's not getting his title shot at the Tokyo Dome. Yep. He's challenging Ryogoku when they go back on October the 12th, which happens to be the week before the Crystal Palace show at Royal Quest. So is he picking up the belt there or is he not? And they do something else at Tokyo Dome. So that was a real kind of yeah, just a real kind of what the fuck? Like, what?
Yeah.
And, I still think there's a good chance the juniors main event Wrestle Kingdom next year. Are they doing some sort of diversion so they can run Hiromu and Naito? Hiromu's, challenging potentially for the Never belt and potentially moving up to heavyweight. I don't know. But yeah, that's thrown everything wide open. I think everyone's like, what the fuck's going on? It all seems so simple. I don't know. And that's kind of cool. I think sometimes just having the shot being for the Tokyo Dome is, can be difficult for their booking. At the same time, would it mean more for Zack if he does win it, to win it there and to win it back in Ryogoku? Is this something to do with, Naito physically, being that you have Kobe, you have Ryogoku, you have Royal Quest, you have Power Struggle, then you have you have a lot of matches in that fall period this year that weren't there last year. They only ran two destruction shows, but one title defense with Sonata and Evil. So is it physically that Naito says, okay, do this, but I can do something underneath that then makes that main event stand up? I don't know, but yeah, it's nice being thrown and having a well booked tournament. I know there's some stories that people are not so happy with. ELP, I know, was one of them, but in general, it felt like there was a lot of cohesion between kind of the booking and each character's journey. You felt like you could attach to it, and I just think it was a really well-timed tournament that kind of has reinvigorated a lot of people's interest in New Japan. And there were some great matches in it. Only a couple of match of the year contenders, but that's where they are. We know where they are, so you've got to have kind of lower expectations. But I feel like I got something out of it, and that's always really cool at wrestling for me. It's like when you feel like you got something out of it. And the best match guy is not a New Japan guy. So Takeshita.
Oh, Takeshita.
Let's talk about Takeshita. Just sensational. It looks like his natural environment. It looks like just made for him, and you could absolutely see him going into that role. And I know there's this thing of he should just go to New Japan. And it's difficult because even though we've seen a couple of DDT guys, I'm talking DDT and Dragon Gate guys, Japanese guys go to New Japan and now win a championship, which was almost unheard of in All Japan. So, we've had Sonata, we've had Shingo, and we've had Kota Ibushi. But none of them would look at them and think they were well focused on runs. So there is no guarantee, although Takeshita fits the mold of what they like in New Japan, his height, his build, his look, everything like that. There's, his style. There's no guarantee that he will be pushed as the guy, It's still much more likely that Tsuji ends up in that position now. I think Umino is probably falling back a little bit into the pecking order, and you can see that with the way that he was treating this G1, like a main events record, etc. Really tense match with Gabe Kidd where, I enjoyed that match a lot. Immense, different energy. So there is that thing. So if he was to go to New Japan, there's no guarantee that he would be that guy, but he does feel more suited there, and it's good to just see him wrestle. So I need to probably check the measurements, but he's probably had the same amount of matches in the last 19 days as he's had in AEW this year. So if he goes back to, when he goes back to AEW, the question is how do you get, it's the Kenny Omega thing, right? So how do you get that guy that you've just had in New Japan that looks like this and take that presentation and what he can do and make him somebody in AEW and actually sustain it and, create a non-English speaking star like we talked about earlier on with the Lucha Brothers? Or does he look at it and, when his contract comes up next year, year after, whenever it is, I should have checked that really, and go, depending on the yen and everything else, does that work as an opportunity? He at least has that opportunity that he can go back there while he's with AEW, I'm sure. He talked about it on the end of his interviews today about potentially going back. But what you don't want to see is him go back to AEW and then just be stood behind Don Callis doing nothing for the next 6 months. He has to go back and have an impact the way that they tried to bring Eddie Kingston back last year.
Yeah.
There needs to be something different. Same with Takeshita. And it's difficult because, we're seeing how difficult it is to get people booked over each other because of all the kind of build-up of issues that we've had in the last few years. But you really need to do that. This guy is special. He really is special. I think he's just a phenomenal talent. I think the way he kind of emotes is really clever as well. You know, I keep saying about, you look at some of the newer guys like Bolton and Newman and something. It's like, I always say, Callum Newman, like, pick your fucking head up. Like, he wanted to see your face. And Takeshita is just, he's just that. He can do the control elements from the heel side. We've seen him do great babyface work in AEW, you know, and stuff when he had the matches with Marks and Hangman and sort of thing. So, you know, you've really got to tap into this one. Don't miss the opportunity on this guy. You know, no wasted potential. He is absolutely what everyone says he is, and he has shown that in this tournament. He has been a star. So it's helped his, from a promotional standpoint, that everyone's talking about him. So just make the most out of that. Just make the most out of that. And then, but, you know, if they don't, then he's got options. But, yeah, I just think he's been phenomenal. And it's just been so enjoyable to watch and to see him wrestle like every other day. Every third day is that's great as well. And I think that's sometimes what it is we don't always see people wrestle as much. And sometimes when you do see them wrestle more often, all the other issues just kind of fucking disappear. So I've loved this tournament. And you know, I think it's the best G1 since 2020. I'm very partial. I'm more partial to 2020 than most people. Mainly just for the Tai Chi Ibushi match where they just kick each other. It's like kick. Just no money clip Okada that year. Yeah. But no, it's been a phenomenal tournament, and hopefully that, you know, you've got some uncertainty going into the fall and into Wrestle Kingdom, and then how Wrestle Dynasty plays in, we'll see. But
what was your favorite match that you watched at the G1?
Oh, that's evil. It's like different ones. So the Shota Umino Gabe Kidd match was like the atmosphere and like there was like a perverseness in watching it, but not being able to take your eyes away from it.
Yep.
And seeing the crowd move, because the crowd knew the story, and they did in Osaka like a couple of days before. So yeah, I thought, and it was just so different. The energy was so different that there's just an atmosphere and a feeling to that you can't replicate. So that one, probably the sleeper one would be Shingo and Sanada. I really like Shingo and Sanada. It was in Korakuen. Just really, really like that match. And Sanada can still go. He can still do the odd thing at G1. I know we like to play down Sanada because he's Sanada in his title reign. But no, I just thought that was, I really enjoyed the Korakuen shows particularly. I thought had a great, great atmosphere. So yeah, they're probably not the traditional picks, because I'm sure, you know, ELP and Takeshita, which was fantastic, will be right up there. But I always tend to go to things that either surprise me or are just different. You know, they're the ones that seem to replicate in my mind. I think we say, it's kind of tendency to say there's loads and loads of good wrestling and good wrestling matches, but some of them all just kind of blur into one for me.
Yeah.
I need something that kind of makes things memorable. I'm very much, that's the way my mindset is. So yeah, they're the ones that were memorable for me. And God, I need to catch up with the M1 now. Can't keep up. Sorry, but yeah, I just wanted to wax a little bit on it. I felt like it was a great tournament. He's done a great job for New Japan. Everything that Tanahashi set out beforehand, he's kind of lived up to. And if that's their future direction, then even Evil was trying. Even Evil was trying. All right, he said, "Oh, you know, I'm going to have the worst match of the tournament every night." And then Jake Lee was like, "No, you're not. Hold my hat." Maybe he took his hat. I think he took his hat. Hold my hat. I think he took his hat. Yeah. Evil took Jake. That's my story now. Evil took Jake Lee's hat. Somebody took his talent as well. I actually thought he was decent in All Japan. Maybe that was just Miyahara. Fuck. I don't know. I'm so sad. It's like I used to like Jake Lee. Can I admit to that? I know. Failed. Going by Evil Sector, can't it? Right, okay. That's enough. Have we anything else? Are we done?
No, I think that's good. I think the thing about whatchamacallit, it's important to point out that, you know, something that our Discord person Drar wrote, which I think is valid, is that, you know, I was thinking about it when you were talking about Tony Khan and Takeshita.
Yeah.
Like, I think Tony Khan sometimes thinks, like this is what Drar said, that he has more time with people than he does, right?
Yeah.
And I think you can look at people, you know, sort of, there's some people in AEW that you would not be surprised if they're not questioning their, spot on the card or where they're at or, what their future is. So
yeah, you got to progress people. Yeah. You have to do what you need to make them stars. Now, for all the criticism that Max gets, Max is really, really good at ensuring all his moments are maximized.
Maximized.
Yeah, but no, he is really good at that. So you have a TV match, it's super promoted, he runs promos beforehand, everything lines up. Same with his pay-per-view matches. So he's really good at that, and that's why it's easy for him to get results now. So you have to replicate that with others. You have to. That's the way they're going to move forward. So yeah, and it's hard because you have so much talent, you have so many people that you need to be keeping on TV as well. So yeah, but that's absolutely the challenge with DeCastro, but he's so good. He's so good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that will do it for this evening. So this has been the Trish and Sarah Wrestling Podcast. We are proud members of the Social Suplex Network. You can listen to all the great shows on the network on the website or through your podcast provider. Have a listen to One Nation Radio, Keeping It Strong Style, All Things Elite, Imps, WWE Adventure, Wrestling Out with Chris Fings, AEW Match Guide, and the infamous Tunnel Talk with our amazing producer, Leah, who basically covers up for all our fuck-ups. So thank you very much, Leah. Oh, and happy birthday for this week. Fuck it.
Happy birthday.
Yes, happy birthday. We are very grateful for you. You can also join the Social Suplex Discord and engage with many a conversation on wrestling all across the world. I enjoyed the Olympic channel as well. I very enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was good.
It was good. And you can also contact us. You can email us at trishandsarahpod@gmail.com, trishandsarahpod@gmail.com for any questions, queries, anything you wish, really. Or you can find us on Twitter, X, the show pod at Trish and Sarah, Trish and Sarah. We're going to come back at a really interesting time, aren't we?
Yes.
Because we're going to be in between, different pay-per-views, WWE pay-per-views, AEW pay-per-views, and I think that's gonna make it fun. Hopefully, yeah. God, I just want to do this TV deal one.
Oh my God!
Let's do it. Until then, we will see you after All In. Of Playing to Discuss, and so I've been Trish.
I've been Sarah.
And we thank you for listening.